Okay, if you love coffee and you want a cake that literally tastes like a smooth, creamy cup of coffee, then my super soft coffee cake that has the most smooth white chocolate and coffee whipped ganache frosting is exactly what you need. So we're going to start off with our incredibly delicious whipped chocolate ganache frosting because it needs some time to set. So it's really easy to put together. You just want to start off by adding 180 grams or 1 cup of white chocolate to a heat-proof bowl and set it aside for now. And you just want to make sure that your white chocolate is either broken up into little pieces or cut into little chunks. Next, add 675 grams or 3 cups of cream to a saucepan and then heat it up on a low to medium heat until the cream begins to gently bubble. Once it starts to gently bubble, take it off the heat immediately as you don't want to overheat the cream, and then immediately pour it over the white chocolate from earlier. At this stage, also add in 1.5 tablespoons of instant coffee powder. There's no need to mix in the instant coffee powder, so just let it kind of sit on the top like that. And now you just want to let this sit for about 5 minutes or so to allow the white chocolate to melt. And then once it's ready, use an immersion blender to blend the cream, chocolate, and coffee together. You want to keep your immersion blender at the bottom of the bowl so that the mixture doesn't kind of go everywhere, and we aren't incorporating too much air at this point. You can also do this last part in a blender or food processor, but just be careful not to overmix it. Now once that's done, it should be nice and smooth like this. And now you just want to let this cool in the fridge. What I like to do is pour it into a wider dish because it'll cool faster. And then you also want to cover the top with some cling wrap so that it's touching the top of the ganache. And this will just prevent a skin from forming as it cools. Okay, now this needs to go into the fridge for at least a few hours because it needs to be really nice and cold before we whip it. So pop this into the fridge for now and let's move on to the cake. So for the coffee cake, begin by preheating your oven to 160°C or 320°F with the fan on, and grease or line 2 8-inch cake tins. As always, I'm using my homemade cake release to grease my tins. It honestly just saves me so much time. Okay, now just set your cake tins aside for now, and next we're going to sift together our dry ingredients. So I've got 320 grams or about 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 40 grams or a 1/3 cup of corn flour, also known as cornstarch, half a teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and 4 tablespoons of instant coffee powder. I use a very fine instant coffee, which comes to about 15 grams. And then using a whisk, just mix that all together until well combined. You can also use cake flour in replacement of the all-purpose flour and cornstarch in this recipe. Okay, now just set your dry ingredients aside for now, and in a large bowl add in 113 grams or half a cup of room temperature unsalted butter, 105 grams or half a cup of unflavoured vegetable oil, and 300 grams or 1.5 cups of soft brown sugar. And then using a hand or stand mixer on a medium-high speed, cream that together for about 2 minutes until it's light and fluffy. Next, you want to add in 3 large eggs one at a time with your mixer on a low to medium speed. And you want to make sure that each egg is mixed in well before you add in the next. So about kind of 10 to 15 seconds in between each egg. Okay, now once all your eggs are mixed in, then next you want to add in 1.25 tablespoons of vanilla essence or extract, 1 teaspoon of white vinegar, and 112 grams or half a cup of buttermilk. Now this recipe uses a total of 337 grams or 1.5 cups of buttermilk, but we're only using half a cup of it for this step. And then you just want to mix that all together until it's well combined. Your batter may look a little curdled, but that's okay. Now just get all of that batter off of your attachments because we're going to be doing the rest of the mixing by hand. So first add in half of your pre-mixed dry ingredients from earlier and gently fold that in with a spatula until just combined. You don't want to overmix it. Then add in the remaining 225 grams or 1 cup of buttermilk and gently fold that in until just combined, and then finish off by folding in the remaining dry ingredients until just combined. Do not overmix the batter, so once all the flour has disappeared and the batter is nice and smooth, then stop there. Your batter should no longer be curdled. And now you just want to evenly distribute it into our 2 pre-prepared cake tins. This batter smells so incredibly good. You can really smell that coffee coming through. Now I'm just leveling out the tops and then giving my cake tins a little bang to get rid of any large air bubbles. And now these are going to go into the oven for 30 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. So my cakes are out of the oven now. They've been cooling in the cake tins for about 20 minutes. They smell so good. And now I'm just running a thin knife around the edges to release the cakes from the cake tins and turning them out onto a wire rack to completely cool. These cake layers are packed with coffee flavor, and just look at how incredibly soft they are. Now while these cakes are cooling, we're going to be making one last element for our coffee cake, and that is lightly candied walnuts. It just adds such great texture and flavor to the cake. So they're really easy to make. You want to start off by placing a saucepan over a medium heat and add in 30 grams or 2 tablespoons of soft brown sugar, 14 grams or 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter, and half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Give that a little stir and then just let the butter and sugar melt, stirring occasionally. Once all the sugar is completely melted and it just starts to gently bubble, then add in 100 grams or 1 cup of coarsely chopped walnuts and stir it so that the walnuts are evenly coated. You don't want your walnut pieces to be too small, so just make sure that they're kind of decent chunks. Now once they're all coated, take the walnuts off the heat immediately and then spread them out onto a tray to completely cool and harden. This should only take about 5 minutes or so. Now while these are cooling, we're going to go ahead and whip our ganache from earlier because our cakes are nice and cool now and ready to assemble. So take off the cling wrap, and the ganache should be like a thick liquid consistency now, and then to make it easier to whip, I'm just pouring it into a large bowl. The little clumps that you can see in my ganache is just the fat from the cream, and this is more likely to happen the longer you leave your ganache to set, but it's not a problem at all. Now to whip the ganache, you can either use a hand or stand mixer, but I'm going to be using my hand whisk because this whips up super quickly, and so you really need to be careful not to over whip it, otherwise it will split. So while whipping it, keep a really close eye on it and check it every so often. And as soon as it stiffens up to kind of semi-stiff peaks, then stop there. Okay, and that is our white chocolate coffee whipped ganache all done. It smells so incredibly good. Now to assemble this cake, the first thing that I'm going to do is just trim off the tops of my cake layers so that they're nice and flat. My cake layers are already pretty flat, so I'm only trimming off a very small amount. Once that's done, I'm placing my first cake layer onto my cake stand, and then I'm spreading out a generous amount of my whipped ganache on top with my offset spatula. Next, I'm evenly distributing half of my candied walnut mixture on the top, and then my next cake layer goes on top of that. Again, I'm just spreading out a generous amount of cream and smoothing it out with my offset spatula. And then I'm also covering the sides with more of my whipped ganache frosting and smoothing it out with my cake scraper. And then to get a nice sharp edge on the top, I'm just using my offset spatula to bring that top lip of frosting into the middle of the cake. Now with my remaining ganache, I'm just popping it into a piping bag with a 1A round tip on it, and I'm just going to pipe some little raindrops around the top edges of the cake. And then to finish off, I'm just evenly distributing the remaining candied walnuts on the top. Okay, and that is it. My coffee cake is all done. This coffee cake is honestly so incredibly good. The cake layers are so nice and soft. The white chocolate and coffee whipped ganache adds a great caramelized coffee flavor, and the candied walnuts add a pop of flavor and texture. It just all goes so well. So good. That white chocolate and coffee whipped ganache frosting is to die for. It is so good. And the candied walnuts just add such a great amount of texture to the cake. It's just like a little crunchy pop of flavor. So that is it, guys. If you do decide to give this recipe a go, then don't forget to leave a review on my blog. It really helps my content reach more people, and I absolutely love hearing from you guys. I'll see you in the next video.